Okay. So tonight's quote is coming from the collected works of Abraham Lincoln, just edited by Roy P. Balzer in a letter to Quentin Campbell from 1862. And Lincoln says, adhere to your purpose and you'll soon feel as well as you ever did. On the contrary, if you falter and give up, you will lose the power of keeping any resolution and will regret it all your life. So I think, whatever it is that you're trying to do, if you're trying to get better at giving a speech or cooking or parenting or whatever the case might be, you'll feel better about yourself even when you get to, a hard place and you're challenged. You'll feel better that you pushed through it and that you didn't give up and you persevered to get better at whatever that skill or goal is that you want to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you to the Toastmasters member and esteemed guest. 30 years ago, a Unitarian minister, Robert Fulham, wrote a book that took the world by storm. It came out to rave reviews. In fact, the San Francisco Chronicle, and I quote, said of the book, "Within simplicity is sublime." To date, 7 million copies have been sold worldwide. The name of the book is entitled, "All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." When I was assessing my communication style, I realized that the seeds of my communication style were actually sown while I was in kindergarten. So everything I learned about active listening, kindness in speech, and honesty came from my kindergarten experience. Kindergarten in the yesteryears, my day, actually had centers where the children could play. Mrs. Schrei, my teacher, would strategically assign certain students to certain centers. Now you have to understand, at this point in time in a child's development, the children will do cooperative play. And in cooperative play, that gives an excellent situations for cognitive and social skill building. There's a lot of challenges in this, and children learn through this. My favorite section, or my favorite center rather, was blocks. I like to build things. But I shortly realized that when I went to Block Center with either Tommy Sevlin or Courtney, who, by the way, I still know, their master plan for what they wanted to build didn't necessarily coincide with mine. And I had to learn to listen to what their plans were, negotiate and cooperate. Otherwise, if chaos broke out, there was the timeout chair. And I did not want to end up in the timeout chair. So in kindergarten, I learned active listening. Now, fast forward to the 1980s. I also had to use my active listening skills in my job. Excuse me. I was a supervisor in a cable line. I had 20, usually middle-aged elderly women, soldering cables. And they sat side by side. It was like an adult kindergarten at times. There was the infighting, there was the not wanting to share soldering irons. You have it, they had it. So I used those skills that I developed in kindergarten at that point in time. Excuse me. Now the question is, Could I have learned those skills? Could I have laid that foundation by reading a book about it as an adult? Peter Murphy wrote a book, Always Know What to Say. Quite catchy. And he professes that if you follow his principles that are laid out in this book, that you will be able to always know what to say. I have a tendency to disagree with that. You might be able to hone your skills, but to actually develop them from scratch, no. I think you really need to learn those in kindergarten, as I did. Now, the type of kindness that needs to be given in your communication style, which I believe is in mine, I also learned in kindergarten. Mrs. Schrei, my teacher, was very kind, and she displayed that type of kindness to her students. Even though you might disagree, even though she disagreed with you, whenever there was a disagreement, it was said in kindness. So in kindergarten, I learned kindness. Honesty is also a very important trait, not only in regular business situations, but also if you want to excel in kindergarten. Honesty was it. You did not want to be caught being asked a question as who ate the last cookie if you have crumbs on your face. Because there was always that chair looking at you in the corner. So you learned to be honest. And to be honest when you disagreed also, which is a great character trait and a great communication style when you're dealing with difficult situations. Say it with kindness, but also say it with honesty, and don't back down from what you believe is true. Now, I would like to read you a poem that Robert Fulham, who wrote the book, wrote, because I think it sums it up. Most of what I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile. It's true. The information that I learned, the active listening, the honesty, the kindness, it was there in kindergarten. That's where I learned. I also learned that making mistakes is a part of the human condition. The key to making mistakes is to learn from them and try not to keep on repeating them. Each year, I've learned more about my communication style and honed it even more. The core values, however, that I learned that are the foundation for my communication style was imprinted on me in kindergarten. And I would like to thank Mrs. Schrei.
Imagine it's Saturday morning and you're in a big room, a big ballroom. You're seated at a round table with 5 other people. They are your team, but you just met them this morning, and already you're collaborating on a project that might change people's lives. This isn't just a fantasy, it's a reality, and it could be your reality if you participate in the DC Regional Project Management Day of Service, or PIMDAS. PIMDAS is the signature event of the nonprofit organization Project Management for Change. At PM for Change, we provide project management services to other nonprofits. Our vision is a world where the boundless potential of the project management discipline is unleashed to empower and transform communities around the world. A world where the boundless potential of the project management discipline is unleashed to empower and transform communities around the world. Through our PMDOS events, we provide nonprofits with a full day of pro bono, that's free, project management consulting, and year-round access to project management resources and support. Our first PMDOS event was in 2015 in Virginia. Since then, there have been more than 15 events around the world in countries that include Australia, UK, and Poland. In the DC area, our PMDOS event is at the STAMP Student Union at the University of Maryland at College Park. This year's event was the 6th annual DC Regional PMDOS, and it was held in February. There were more than 20 nonprofits and 84 project managers in the grand ballroom at the STAMP Student Union. They were organized into teams. Each team had 1 or 2 nonprofit representatives and 2 to 4 project managers at each table. Each team spent the day planning a project to address a critical need identified by the nonprofit. To fuel this activity, we had breakfast and lunch and keynote speaker and raffle prizes. But the best part of the day for me is at the end. At the end of the day, I invite the participants to stand up and tell us how they feel about their experience at PMDOS. And every year, this year was no different. Several nonprofit representatives stand up from the table, they take the microphone, and they emotionally share what a huge difference the day has made to them personally and to their nonprofit. For me, this makes the 9 months of planning the event worth every single minute of effort. Now, you may wonder why it takes 9 months to plan this single event for a couple of hundred people. We could probably do it much faster if we had a dedicated staff, but we don't. Project Management for Change is entirely staffed by volunteers, most of whom have full-time jobs, including me. I joined PM for Change when I was an independent contractor working for government contractors like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. I spent all of my work time on proposals for government contracts. That means I helped define the strategy for how to win the contract, and I did a lot of writing about how are we going to manage the contract if we win. I really missed the days of working on a contract. So I joined Project Management for Change. 3 months later, I got a new corporate job, a full-time corporate position. And so now I get to do project management for my hobby. Oh, I forgot to mention, I decided that if I couldn't do project management for my job, I would do it for my hobby. So I joined PM for Change. And then 3 months later, I got a full-time corporate job. So now I get to do project management for my hobby and for my job. In my experience as a volunteer at Project Management for Change, I have learned that skills-based volunteering can be very rewarding. It can give you the opportunity to use skills that you don't get to use in your normal job. It can change your perspective on your profession and expand your professional network. I actually know a few people who got new jobs through their volunteering activities. It can also expand your personal network. That's code for you can make new friends. Most importantly, it's a very meaningful way to have impact on the world. If you would like to participate in the DC Regional Project Management Day of Service, mark your calendar for February 20th, 2021, and watch our website, pm4change.org, for the registration announcement in November, or volunteer now to help plan the event. We need lots of help, especially in the areas of marketing and communications. If you're not sure if this would be a good fit for you, there's a great 5-minute video on our website that gives more insight into the event, or you can talk to me. If this isn't the right fit for you, find another nonprofit that needs your skills and sign up to help them. There are lots of opportunities, and I have 3 recommendations on where to find them. If you work for a company that has a corporate social responsibility team, contact them. Tap into your personal and professional networks, including any industry groups associated with your profession, or subscribe to a matching service such as can be found at volunteermatch.org or idealist.org. Any time is a good time to be a volunteer, but now is probably a better time than ever. You probably have more time available due to the COVID-19 restrictions, and there is certainly a much increased need for volunteers due to the pandemic. Many organizations are meeting that need with virtual support, so you don't even have to leave your home to have social impact. And don't forget the other benefits of skills-based volunteering. You get to practice skills that you don't get to use at work, or refine ones that you do use at work. You can get a new perspective on your profession and expand your professional network. You can make new friends, and you can change the world.
Table topics.
Hello, everybody. Yes, so table topics, as mentioned earlier, is a 1 to 2 minute impromptu speech, and it will be based on some of the topics that I will ask you about. So if you would like to participate, even if you are a guest, you may participate, and we will vote after that for whoever was the best table topics speaker. So first I'm going to read what I would like you to talk about, and then if you could, how are we going to do this? We're going to raise our hand if
We're going to chat me on the chat box.
okay. So write me on the chat box so you can give it a try. And our topic will be based on the topic of the moment, the coronavirus, and being on lockdown. I think I have enough for three different tries. So the first one is, this is what I do to stay sane during the lockdown. If anybody would like to participate and say, this is what I do to stay sane during the lockdown.
Okay, so what I do to stay sane, to be honest, not much has changed. Fortunately, the governor has designated real estate as an essential business, so I am still doing business. However, we're drastically changed in some ways. For someone, for instance, someone called me today to see one of my listings. We have to have them fill out a questionnaire. Have they been around anybody who has been diagnosed? Do they have any of the symptoms? Have they been pre-qualified? So it's a pretty stringent requirement for them to be able to go into properties. But other than that, I've kind of changed from asking for business to just calling around people and saying, how you doing? Do you have everything you need? Is everybody okay? And it's actually been pretty nice. Had some great conversations, because people are surprised to have someone call and just see how they're doing. And do they need anything? Because we have a roll or two of extra toilet paper. And my wife gives me a hard time because I do find a reason to get out of the house every now and then. Something else we need at the store. We try to stock up, but you know how that is. It doesn't always work that way. You of course get back home and forget what you really went there for. So that's how I'm staying sane. Really not much different. Just really changing the way I communicate with potential clients and yeah, just having more time to spend with my wife because she's also working from home. So that's kind of cool too. Because I saw a comment, people talking about how it's terrible spending time with their spouse, and a friend of mine added a comment that I totally agree with, and that is, I married somebody I like, so it's not a big deal. That's me.
Thank you, Larry. And the next one is, one thing I am going to change in it could be business, in my life, in my habits. What is one thing you're going to change when this is all over?
Spending, I guess, a lot of time with myself. I realize I am critical on my own self, just in my thoughts and how I tend to interact with others. I have a tendency of thinking about conversations over and over again and pinpoint things that I could have done better or said better, or I just find that I'm hard on myself. I'm very critical, and I need to be a little bit more patient and accepting of myself, and at the same time work on improving things that I don't like or would like to improve upon.
And the last one, which is kind of like what you said is leading us to that. Things I discovered about blank, it could be anyone, or about yourself during the lockdown. What have you discovered about your spouse, your kids, yourself, or anybody else?
So the one thing that I have found is that social distancing is very interesting. I think I prefer to be up close and personal to people. You know, this whole thing of just being so far away all the time, oh, it's, very strange. Well, okay, maybe I won't be that close to everybody all the time. It's very interesting to see how the change in the social structure is affecting people differently. I have a hobby, and the hobby is ham radio. And that allows me to listen to different conversations from just everyday people all over the world. Now, we're constantly being bombarded by information that comes to us from filtered news sources. I listen to NPR a lot. All of their stories seem to focus on how important social distancing is and how it's such a foreign idea to not want to social distance. And I happen to agree to that, actually. But listening on the ham radio, I hear people from various parts of the country who are actually very upset about the idea of social distancing. And that's given me a sort of a different perspective. We're pretty blessed that in our current situation, we're not being dramatically impacted by what's happening around us. Of course, we can't have the same interactions that everybody else was used to, but the bills are still being paid. For a lot of people, that's not the case, and it's just a different perspective to allow me to say, okay, there may be some reason to consider relaxing the social distancing rules. I think those things need to be thought through very carefully, but that's one of the things that I have a new appreciation for is the other person's perspective. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I found Lisa's speech very, very well structured. It had a very, well, first of all, she started out with having an introduction prepared that was very helpful to give us an idea as to what she was going to talk about tonight. And she also had a great start. It was a captivating start to hook us in. And then she also go down the list of what she wanted to say, and point by point, she was able to say that in a very well-structured way and end it with a great conclusion. It was very practical, it was very personable, and I loved her great use of examples along the way. So specifically, I love how she started out with mentioning a book, and she did not give away the title right away. So that really pulled us in to try to find out what that book was. And she did mention it was sold like 7 million copies, and it kind of just raised the excitement. What is that book? I want to know, maybe, but I want to read it too. And it was a very cute title to the book, and how she identified with that book's message about how she learned her communication skills from early on. And then she mentioned the 3 great communication skills and styles that she identified, and namely active listening, kindness in speech, and honesty. And to each one of those 3 points, she bring in some examples in her life, and that also make it very personable. And she went 1 point at a time and using different examples. And I thought that was very, very clear and very helpful to follow along. And another part of the speech, she wanted to also point out if we can learn the styles in books. And she also clearly stated that that was not really that helpful, that eventually she ultimately learned her styles from early on in life. And overall, I think it was a great speech. The only thing really that I had something that I think could be beneficial to help with that speech was really, I think, something to do with this new virtual platform. Because of the lack of being physically present for us to see her movements, oftentimes we really rely solely on the face, on the upper body. So I found that if we want to continue to hone our skill on the virtual platform, we really have to increase our facial expressions, our voice, our dynamics, to really make it more engaging. So that's something that I got that great advice last time myself from Christine, that we do have to do a little bit differently when we do it online. That includes, like I said, the dynamic of the speech, being more animated, have more facial expressions, just to make up for not being able to be there physically. And other than that, I think the speech was very well structured, presented with clear example, and also ended with a wonderful quote and the mention of names and people and the teacher's name, and I thought that makes it very personal. It was a great speech, and I really enjoyed it.
This project is evaluation and feedback second speech is what it's called. This speech can be on any topic. Its main purpose is for the member to demonstrate that he or she has applied the feedback from the first speech. Beth chose to give the same speech. In advance of the speech, Beth sent me the YouTube link to the first speech and also the notes from Jerry, who was her first evaluator, which was very helpful. It gave me a good start of what to look for. Again, your speech was well organized, Beth, and I think 2 things that really stand out is 2 of the elements. One, for any speech, is if the person talking is knowledgeable of the topic, and also that that you convey some emotional connection to the topic, which I think you did both of those very well. So that was a good topic for you. The 2 recommendations from the first speech, one, lowering the energy a little bit for me, it felt like 90% of the presentation was high energy. That limited the impact of your vocal variety and impact moments. And when I went back and watched your first speech, I agree with that. It was probably at the 95% level. You definitely dropped this one way down, which was good. I think it really lended itself to a more natural, real delivery, person-to-person delivery, as opposed to a professional presentation, which allowed you, when you got to the end and you were doing your personal stories and an appeal to action for people to get involved. I did love that in your appeal to action that you didn't, it wasn't just, oh, we'll get involved in this organization. It really hit or demonstrated how the mission of your organization is to affect the world, however it is that you can do that. So you tied that in really well. I did notice that from the first video that you did a lot of speaking with your hands. And this time you did not do that, which is really good, because the first one, you had a lot of, it wasn't gestures as much as it was speaking with your hands. So this time your gestures were much more deliberate. You had the big room at the beginning and also round tables. So you did a really good job of paring those down so that a gesture had more impact when you did use it. Another one was from the first speech is to use a personal story. You almost overhauled your speech with that. It seemed like the whole second half, you made it more relatable to your experience with your organization. And one part that I thought really added a little bit of drama is when you said at the end of the conference and you have the people come forward to share their experience, and you held the microphone and just talked about the emotional impact that it has on the participants, and also the emotional impact on you, just watching the participants kind of a snowball. So I thought that was really good. Let me look at my time, how we're doing. Oh, wrap up. All right, well, good job, Beth. I can talk to you more afterwards.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll see you on the 30th, guys.
Bye, everyone. Great
Bye. Good seeing you.